To the public, I would like to read a webcast statement before opening the meeting formally this evening. This council meeting will be webcast, and I remind all those present that their words and actions will be broadcast to a wider audience, and certain conduct is unacceptable and will not be tolerated. Should any person not wish to be recorded, I advise that they should leave the meeting room prior to any statements being made. Any defamatory statements made are not the position of the council and remain an individual's opinion. Council accepts no responsibility for any defamatory statements, and all liability remains with the person making the remarks. And now, an acknowledgement of country. I would like to acknowledge the Kamilaroi people, who are the traditional custodians of this land. I'd also like to pay respect to elders past and present, and extend that respect to other Aboriginal people here this evening. And for our evening prayer, councillors, Almighty God, we humbly beseech Thee to vouchsafe Thy blessing upon this council, direct and prosper our deliberations to the advancement of Thy glory and the true welfare of the people of the Regional Council and Australia. Amen. And councillors, so I'd like to now formally open the meeting, and the first item on our agenda this evening is apologies and leave of absence. We have an apology from Councillor Inglis. Moved Councillor Maxwell and Councillor Betts. Thank you. I'll put that motion. Those in favour? Those against? The motion is accepted. Thank you. Item 2, community consultation, and we have 2 members of the community to make representation to council, and Karen is setting up the IT for that. So our first speaker this evening is Cameron Collins on behalf of Tamworth Equine Centre. Mr. Collins, if you wish to make your presentation to council, please. But just beforehand, if you could just state whether you or not you have made any reportable political donations to either the councillor or any staff.
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Councillor. I have made no political donations to any councillor or any staff member of Tamworth Regional Council.
Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
Excellent. Good evening, councillors. Thanks for the opportunity to speak on this matter. Can I start by giving you some background on who we are and what we do? I'm the Managing Director of the Stone Equine Hospital, and Stone Equine Hospital is the largest equine veterinary clinic in Australia. It has 30 vets and around 100 staff. As you know, Stone is the horse capital of Australia, but it's, in our mind, focused on thoroughbreds. And we see Tamworth as the performance horse capital of Australia, with the horses that you have in the area and the infrastructure, with the ALEC, etc. We think that performance horse capital is something really worth developing for Tamworth as an asset, and we would like to contribute to that future. I guess that's why we're in Tamworth. We have a number of veterinarians working for us in Tamworth, and we'd like them to buy into that business. So, having read Briggs's assessment, I understand there are 2 issues. Basically, the first one is a new development on the site, which is the subject of this request, which is basically a minor development that will provide facilities to help us utilise the site more efficiently. So it is relatively small, and my understanding is the specifications are designed for it to be sufficient to withstand flood conditions. So from that point of view, it's a minor addition, and it should be fit for purpose. The second issue that arises there is there's an existing office which was built without approval about 18 years ago. And you might ask why we're operating a veterinary hospital out of something that doesn't have approval. I guess our understanding when we bought into that business was that it had an animal boarding establishment included any associated riding school or veterinary hospital, so we thought that was approved. It also has approval from the Veterinary Surgeons Board to operate as a veterinary hospital, so we thought we were doing the right thing there. This structure is only inhabited during business hours, so from a flood risk point of view to human safety, we don't think that presents a particularly great risk, given that there are residences within 100 yards on either side. So I guess my request tonight would be that council could consider these as two different issues. One, the approval of the small addition, and the other is that we're more than happy to work with council and abide by consent conditions to gain approval for the existing office space to be approved. So I guess that's a quick summary of my position. Happy to take any questions. I know Stephen Hills from the Six Hills Group is also going to speak on the technical aspects of this.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Collins. Thanks for your representation. Councillors, the second speaker this evening is Mr. Stephen Hill on behalf of Six Hills Group, speaking to the same matter. And Mr. Hill, if you could just state your name and the matter you wish to speak to, and please state whether you've made any reportable political donations to either a councillor or staff member of Tamworth Regional Council. Thank you.
You're going to have to do that again, Mr. Mayor, because Karen put him on the phone.
Thank you. Councillors, the second speaker this evening is Mr. Stephen Hill on behalf of Six Hills Group, Proprietary Limited. Mr. Hill, if you could just, before you make your presentation, please state whether or not you've made any reportable political donations to either a councillor or staff member of Tamworth Regional Council. Thank you.
I have not made any political donations to councillors in the past. Thank you.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
Am I okay to proceed?
Yes, please.
Okay, so thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak. I do appreciate this. And I just want to recognise the importance of that process, because in today's environment, we can't always have everything 100% compliant as we would like. Hence this process, which allows a better judgment and assessment for unique circumstances. So with that, the subject matter is an existing building, and you have a report before you which is well prepared and does articulate the history of that building. I think it's important that I confirm on page 11, it does state in the assessment that it is important to clarify the issue of permissibility of the land use is not in question. And what that means is the council planner has acknowledged that, and they acknowledge that an animal boarding and training establishment is permissible in the zone, and that includes things such as breeding, boarding, training, keeping, caring animals for commercial purpose, includes associated riding school or ancillary veterinary hospital. So the proposal before you is an existing building that was approved. There's a 17 square metre addition that is seeking approval. It's quite small. If I can visualise that for you, it would be less than a single carport, something that you park your car in. The importance of that structure, however, is the building is occupied. So the existing building was built about 20 years ago, and it's since changed owners twice since that time. The existing building was approved as it stands. However, about 18 years ago, a former owner had done an addition of 60 square metres which didn't have approval. We acknowledge that that doesn't have approval. What we're seeking is approval for a 17 square metre addition. The owner, or the land use tenant, Mr. Cameron Collins, who operates horses and large animals on the site, he generally runs a business from Scone, Equine and in Tamworth, and a lot of his customers work on rural farms, and their officers undertake field work on those farms, and that can be seen on their website. They do a lot of field work. They don't entertain companion animals. They look at equine and livestock animals, but sometimes they bring those animals back to the property in King George Avenue, and they're large beasts, and they'll attend care to those animals, and sometimes those animals have to be euthanised. The 17 square metre addition includes a I-beam hoist, so it's a small concrete slab with some colour-bond cladding and a hoist, and it allows to lift an animal once it's been euthanised, and then it's removed from the site altogether, appropriately disposed of legally, but it allows that function to take place. So that's quite an important part of this. With the building they have now, they've recycled this building that's 20 years old, and they use that building primarily to have a couple of animals in there. So there's a few stables in there, and they do have clients that engage them to do artificial insemination. So they'll extract material from an animal and they'll send that out to a farmer, or they'll send it out to someone that wants that product. And they also do breed some animals on the site. It's a great site for it. It's a large open land, and it allows big animals to roam around. Nobody sleeps in the building, and the building is beautifully positioned right on the edge of the bitumen road, which is King George Avenue. So I'm getting close to wrapping up, but I do note that the sensitivity of the site is it's a flood zone, and the council did approve, and it's also in the report on page 17, an on-site sewage management facility to facilitate plumbing in the building. That's all been approved and done legally in a board. That was on the 8th of May 2019. And council also in that report on page 17 acknowledged that the approved component of the building, as well as the proposed addition, is certified to withstand the force of floodwaters, and Barnes and Engineers have provided commentary on that, which is also acknowledged that the range is suitable and under the floodproofing guidelines. The real concern is the offices are below the flood level, and because it's a habitable use and it didn't get approval, that shouldn't be there. So what we're hoping to get out of tonight is if the 17 square metre addition could be approved to allow that animal establishment with some animal caring components, veterinary hospital if you will, to continue, and perhaps deal with the illegal office building as a totally separate matter and have that remediated, whether that be that it is removed or whether that is that there's scope for a separate DA to raise that floor level and do other alterations, but deal with that as a proper process on its own. That is really what we are hoping to achieve tonight, is to get that 17 square metre approved. In closing, I really feel that in the interest of getting an ideal outcome for this site, is an existing site. People don't sleep in the building. It is very much a concrete floor, colour-bond clad building that has been looked at by engineers. I don't believe it poses a risk to the public or the health or the property of council, including bridges. And when the people are on the site, it's in daytime hours, and again, it's right on the edge of the road. So I don't see this small addition life-threatening, and I would encourage the councillors to consider my words and think what might be reasonable to enable this building to continue and be recycled for the better use of the building to continue a use into the future. Thank you for listening to me tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. So, councillors, that concludes community consultation for this evening. We'll move on to item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. Move Councillor Rodder and seconded Councillor Impey. Thank you. Is there any matters arising from those minutes, councillors? If not, I will put that motion. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The motion is carried. Item 4, disclosures of interest. Any councillors have any disclosures they wish to tender this evening? If not, we'll move through. Item 5, there is no Merrill minute, and also item 6, there is no notice of motion. That brings us to item 7.1. Thank you, Councillor Maxwell, and seconded Councillor Tickle. Councillor Maxwell, do you wish to speak to your motion? Any councillors wish to speak against the motion? Councillor Betts.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I've read this report, I've read it thoroughly, and it's a 17.5 square metre building on a concrete floor, colour bond, and I went out, had a look at the area, and there's a number of houses in that vicinity, and I can't see why there can't be a way to be working around that with advanced flood warning systems. As it is the case in a lot of those areas out there with the SES, they do have that. So I'll be voting against the motion. Thanks, Mr.
Thank you. Do we have a councillor who wishes to speak for the motion? Councillor Tickle.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. When I first read this, I thought, well, there must be a way that we can approve this. However, by the time I read thoroughly through all the report, I do agree with the recommendation. The underlying issue, of course, is the unauthorised works that were carried out quite some time after the initial building was approved. And it's interesting that this establishment has changed, business has changed hands twice. And until now, this hasn't been revealed, the fact that the addition is unauthorised and it's in a flood zone. Like it's well known in Tamworth that this is a flood area, and we have to be very careful in what we approve and we don't approve. I would like to think, sure, business as usual, but we have to be very careful in the decision that we make here. But in making my comments, I would like to think, and I know that the Tamworth Regional Council will continue to work very closely with the applicant to try to find a solution, whether the business be partially still retained on that side, but there must be a way that we can work to retain that business, but not necessarily totally on that site. I don't like having to vote against the business, however, with all the evidence before us, it is clearly has been unauthorised work, and it is in what is clearly defined as a flood zone.
Thank you. Do we have any councillors wish to speak against the motion? Councillor Rodder.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I understand, that there has been some unauthorised construction in that location, but that can be remedied with retrospective approvals. And in relation to the issue of the property being in the flood-prone area, it's a building and I guess an industry and a business that probably suits that area. They indicated that they only use it during the day, so obviously if it was subject to inundation, that would not necessarily occur without warning. I'm sure that we could work with them and maybe suggest alternative structures such as maybe a berm around the property or something like that, which may slow the inundation speed if that was a problem. And as Councillor Betts indicated, some form of flood warning system or something to those landholders. And keep in mind that that business and building is next door to a residential home on the northern side, and across the road is another residential home, and then diagonally opposite is another residential home, and opposite to the west is another residential home just a little bit down the way. And I'm sure that all of those people that historically have resided in those homes have got out in enough time. And around this table and in this room, I mean, who can remember when the last flood inundated all of that area? I can remember, I'm sure there was something in the 1990s or something like that, but that shows how infrequent flood events are that actually inundate the buildings in that in that down that road, and I think that I'm sure that we could there'd be a way that we could keep this business going, particularly in these uncertain times of with all the calamities that many businesses have suffered. I'm sure that we could find a way forward.
Thank you. Any councillors wish to speak for the motion? Any? Councillor Wilson.
I'm for and against, Mr Mayor. First of all, can I, so if I take my time now, I express surprise, first of all, that this can change hands twice and no legal entity that's been used to do the searches has identified the fact that there's unauthorised buildings there, first of all. And that emphasises the fact that one should be careful in doing that. I do see this as two issues. I'm not in favour of retrospective approvals, and I'm not in favour of setting precincts. But somehow common sense rules over this. I don't think this particular edition, this DA, will change the safety or lack of safety of this particular building and site. But the unauthorised building does need to be legalised. I'm wondering whether there's one way of us approving this on condition that the pre-existing unauthorised buildings can be approved. So in other words, it will be a nuisance because it will be deferred, but the point of being accountable, and we do need to be accountable. If we allow unapproved buildings to exist and be added on, then it's setting a precinct, which I don't like, for behaviour that we'd probably rather not happen in this area. What I'd like to see is that we approve the new building on the condition that the pre-existing unauthorised buildings can be authorised and brought up to standard. I'm happy to take advice on that from the director, but I am sure there's a way where we can approve this and ensure that the rest of the building, particularly the section where the flooring is below flood level, be brought up to standard so that an outcome can be achieved all round. So if I could ask that question.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Wilson, the way that would normally be handled and the way that it should have been handled in this instance was that when the proponents were advised of the illegality of the existing premises, they should have withdrawn the existing development application until those matters had been addressed. If they had have done that, they would have had their DA fees refunded, and we could have reprocessed this development application at the appropriate time once the other buildings. I don't think it's a good idea to sort of say something is dependent on something else. They need to go back and do the first step in the process, which, if they believe they can, is to do something that would get the building that is currently there being illegally used authorised, and then bring a development application around the extension back supplementary to that being determined. I don't think it's appropriate for council to be indicating that, oh, we think this is okay for you to build stuff in the floodplain, as long as you get approval for the other stuff that you've already put there that shouldn't be there either. So my suggestion would again be to council, as per the recommendation from the staff, is that because they didn't withdraw the application, you need to refuse this on the basis of the planning principles given, and they need to go back and revisit getting the approvals for the building that's already there, and then bring this back to council for determination, if indeed they can get approval for what is already there.
So, for clarity, then you're indicating that this discussion's already been held with the applicant, that he needs to withdraw this, or they need to withdraw this, and then have the pre-existing buildings.
Councillor Wilson, what I will confirm, and I'm sure the acting director or Mr Lobsey can confirm, is that the proponents were made very well aware of these issues as they arose, and they decided to continue to pursue this current development application.
Thank you. Any further comments, councillors? Councillor Impey?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Look, I can only think of endorsing the recommendation on the basis that, well, I know there are residents nearby, so I guess it's a little bit mixed messages here, but I wouldn't be able to live with myself if there was to be a flood in the future and one of the staff members of the business as it grows, was to be injured or to lose their life as a result of the business, continuing to grow as they wish. I'm in two minds, a little bit like Councillor Wilson as well. I don't like to see businesses not able to prosper. And the fact of the matter is, the business has been there for some time, I think since, 2000. So if there was a common sense approach beyond this process of not approving the development at this stage, whereby some sort of process to allow the business to grow somehow. Not sure how. I'm not a professional in this area. That would be a good outcome, but at the moment, as far as I can see, it's somewhat black and white. I think it is a flood-prone area. We can't do anything to change that.
Thank you. Councillor Webb?
Yeah, Mr Mayor, I won't be supporting the recommendation, and you might be surprised by that, because I normally support recommendations that are based on some good sound grounds, and this one to some degree is. When you go for a drive down there and you have a look at actually what's down there, and you have a look across the road and you see the massive structures that are all the way along the other side of the road, and you have a look at this potentially is a very small building that they want to build. Yes, we're knocking it back in the first instance because the current use of the site is operating without development consent, and I take on board what the General Manager said, and I concur with that. I think that's very sound. But there's only one clear way out of this, and that is that we knock back the recommendation. It goes back, and they do have to go through the process that they should have gone through in the first place. By knocking back the DA, I think we're sending a very bad message, considering what is on that road. Now, if you councillors have been along there, which I'm sure you have, and had a look at what's along that road, this is nothing. But it doesn't comply. So yeah, I'm a bit with Charles and Anita, Councillor Eppie and Councillor Wilson, but I can't support a recommendation knocking back the development of a 17 square metre shed when I look out there and I look at what's across the road, and I drive down the road a bit further, and there's a structure down there that is like a big fence with all the big steel structures with a colour-blind sheeting on it. The purpose of that is to block the water, and it'll create some issues in the future if there is a flood down there. So there's a lot of things down there that probably need to be fixed before we start having to worry too much about this. But this is what's before us, and we have to make a judgment on this. But really, I do, Mr Mayor, support what the General Manager said, but I, for the life of me, I just find it very difficult to support a recommendation like this.
Thank you, councillors. Councillor Maxwell?
I'll be supporting the recommendation, Mr Mayor, because I think we've talked about mixed messages and approving some, retrospectively approving something that's hasn't been given approval, doesn't sit too well with me. And I think if there's a way around it, okay, but at this stage I will be voting in favour of the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillors, any other councillors wish to make comment? I would like to make comment, and for me this is one of those really challenging applications that council is obliged to consider. That's our job. We have to make a determination. The retrospectivity of the approval for the structure for me is, I think that's pretty easy to do. I don't personally, I don't see any real big dramas in the proponent gaining permissibility for that. The problem that I have is the implications of egress in a flood, and unfortunately I'm not quite there, and I have had discussions with the proponent early in the process, and that was one of the things that I pointed out to the proponent, that they would need to satisfy council that they could meet the requirements with their flood planning, and I'm not convinced that that's quite there yet. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to do something which I'm not very comfortable with, I can assure you, and that's putting limitations on businesses, and particularly businesses that are identified in our blueprint, in all the ideologies that the council has as far as promoting equine industries into our region. The simple fact is it's probably just in the wrong place for me, and I'm going to be supporting the recommendation. So, do we have any final comments, councillors, before I call for a vote? If not, I'll put the motion, and remembering that as a development application we indicate our views with a show of hands. Those in favour of the recommendation? Those against the recommendation? The recommendation is carried. That brings us to item 7.2.
Move it.
Move Councillor Webb and second Councillor Impey. Thank you. Councillor Webb, do you wish to speak to your motion?
No, very straightforward recommendation, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Any councillors wish to speak against? Any councillors wish to make comment? If not, I'll put the recommendation. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The motion is carried. Item 7.3. Move Councillor Impey and Councillor Maxwell. Thank you. Councillor Impey, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Oh, no, I think it's fairly straightforward too.
Thank you. Any councillors wish to speak against? Any councillors wish to make comment? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The motion is carried. That brings us, councillors, to item 8.1. Move Councillor Tickle and Councillor Wilson. Thank you. Discussion. Councillor Tickle.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This represents a very thorough report and demonstrates a high level of planning for now and into the future. A significant development with major economic benefits to the Tamworth and region. It is a really detailed report, and I'd like to see this made available through the Chamber of Commerce and Industry or wherever, even though we know it's publicly available right now in the council business pages, but I've already sort of referred people to it because it is an excellent report. It really gives a thorough overview of what is planned for that area, even though we've spoken about it before. We can now see the plans in more detail and the contributions from the state and federal government, and I must say the state government's contributions in this case have been significant, and it's great to see the three levels of government working together to grow our regional centre. And so again, to commend the author of the report and all those who contributed not only to the report but to get the project to this stage.
Thank you. Any councillors wish to speak against the motion? Any councillors wish to make comment? Councillor Wilson?
Just to Mr Mayor to say it's a great project, and I agree it's a thorough report, and it is hard for the community, I think, to get their mind around what's actually involved because it's such a big concept and something that we haven't done before. So it's exciting. It's just taken longer than we would have hoped. It's a couple of questions. With the line from the main line to the intermodal, the New South Wales government's funding that. If there's a blowout in that, will they pick up the extra money? If there seems to be increases, that's with the 7.1 million they've given us. And my second question is the free land lease for Cube. It says for a number of years. Is that just to be equated with the amount of time they put in for building? So their land lease will be free for a number of years.
I'll ask the General Manager.
So through Mr Mayor, Councillor Wilson, I can answer the second part of the question, that is the negotiations with Cube when we went through the expression of interest for the operator of the intermodal. Those negotiations were done on the basis that they would provide the capital investment up front to actually build the structure, even though it will still be on what is community land, so it will be council's asset in the longer term. And the offset to us not having to come up with the capital to build the intermodal would be that we would defer their lease fees for a time equivalent to the recoupment of the costs that they invest into the facility.
And Mr. Resch may be able to answer the first question.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. There's two entities that will deliver this project. One is Transport for New South Wales and one is Tamworth Regional Council. Transport for New South Wales certainly of the view that they will wear any overruns in this project, and they've built contingencies into their upper limit estimates based on that fact. Tamworth Regional Council will be responsible for that line you spoke about, which comes off the main line into the intermodal. And we're taking the same view that this has been funded by Regional New South Wales. Projects that we do that are funded by the RMS or by Transport, but the Transport section of RMS are funded a little bit differently. But in this instance, we're working on the basis that there'll be a lump sum payment and council will deliver the project for that amount and they'll be responsible for any overrun. So that's why that contingency is being built to those costs.
Okay, any further comments? Councillor Webb?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to also compliment the report writers. I think it's a great report, but more importantly, it's a great outcome for the city of Tamworth and for the region. We're looking at something here that will carry us in very good stead for the next 10 years or more. And I think if we look at the report, it's broken down into three fairly distinct projects. One is the rail line reactivation, the intermodal site, and of course the development of the whole site as a whole. And I think what we do need to do as a council, and I think we need to be very careful how we do this, because there's a lot of money tied up in this, and it's community money. People say the council spent X amount of dollars on this. Well, we're spending community money on this, and I think it's very fair if we can demonstrate to the community the value of what we've spent on their behalf on this project. So there's a huge amount of value in all of those three projects. And I think we've got to be very careful on how we actually market what we're doing out there and make sure we do it on a regular basis and regular updates on what's actually happening out there and what opportunities that this whole development is giving this region. And there are going to be a host of opportunities that come along as we progress. So I think it's very important that the community are kept informed, and we make sure that along the way, every time there's a development of some sort, that we let the community know that the money we spent was spent wisely. And I would ask that that marketing plan be kept in motion for the whole way through, and particularly over the next 12 months, where there's going to be a lot of activity out there with the, I guess, the rail reactivation, the intermodal hub, and the roundabout there near the airport. There's a lot of people asking questions about that, and it's a very expensive project, well funded by state and federal. But they're the sort of things that the community need to know. They need to know that their money has been spent wisely, and that they need to know that the money that's going into these developments is going to make the future for them and their children a good one.
Thank you. Councillor Impey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's a truly exciting part of our future of our city and our region, and it shouldn't be underestimated the uniqueness of the site. And I've been thinking to myself, I can't think of too many estates that house both heavy, general, industrial and business park activity with highway frontage and access to highway as well as access to airport and rail. And so with a combination of all those assets and the opportunity base that it provides for organisations to choose to then set up in this part of the world, I think it truly does represent a fantastic and just such a wonderful opportunity for this region to grow. And I'd also like to endorse comments made. We should be quite appreciative, of course, of the contributions that the community has made, as well as state and federal governments in making this possible, and as well as all the fantastic work that the Infrastructure and Services Directorate has made to this. A lot of people work behind the scenes to bring it this far, and I think that shouldn't be underestimated.
Thank you. Any final comments, councillors? Councillor Rudder?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question, talking about opportunities. A farmer recently advised me that the old Westdale silos administered by GrainCorp were in fact quite a popular silo site for local farmers, and were discontinued when I think part of the rail line leading to that was flooded. But I was just wondering, and I realise it would mean another lot of. It's not a great distance from the intermodal site, and I was wondering about the opportunity, or looking at an opportunity to restore that small section as well to enable the use of those silos by local farmers to get their grain in there and obviously off to market. Would that be a possibility of considering that opportunity, or would that just muddy the proposal thus far?
Councillor Rodder, I'd suggest that that would be a separate discussion, and that would be a discussion that maybe the council could have with GrainCorp to see if there is an interest. It would come at quite a cost. I think the intersection costs for activating a disused railway line are in excess of $1 million alone, plus there's another floodway there that the line would have to cross. So, but that would be a matter which can't be attached to this this report, but certainly something that we can take up. Any final discussions? Councillor Tickle.
Thank you. This project certainly does continue to demonstrate the confidence that businesses from both within and outside our Tamworth region have in Tamworth and its growth into the future. Also within the report, the environmental sustainability has also been considered, and particularly in relation to having some open space and tree-lined streets, which is very important, and it has been acknowledged by this council that we must do that in the planning stage. So it's very encouraging to see the inclusion of trees in the street to improve, not only to improve the amenity, but to improve the environment. And through our public consultation, we've been continually asked to do this, and also like with the Taminda region, so many workers over in that area asked about open space because they have nowhere to go and sit in a little park or anything at lunchtime to eat their lunch. Not everybody's driving in and out in trucks. Like a lot of office workers, a lot of people work in these areas, so we do have to consider their needs as well. So terrific that we've got open space in there as well. I can't see the detail on the water sustainability, but I know that that will be considered because again it's part of the motion that's been before in council and passed to be included in all our future planning and works.
Thank you. Councillors, I'll now invite the proponent, Councillor Tickle, or you'll have closed the debate. Thank you. So I'll now put the motion. Councillors, those in favour? Those against? The motion is carried. Item 8.2.
Move it.
Move Councillor Webb and Councillor Betts. Thank you. Councillor Webb, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Not really, Mr Mayor, but I will just say one little thing. I think it's great that we've been given the opportunity to do this, and it's good that we're in a position to be able to partner in this. I'm just wondering how it's all going to work out with this COVID stuff on that's happening. But anyway, it's great to be a part of it, however it happens, and yeah, well done to our water people for obviously they're recognised as leaders in the field across the area, so it's great to see. It'll be good for Tamworth.
Thank you. Any councillors wish to speak against the motion? Any councillors wish to make a comment? Councillor Betts.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. Just briefly, I do totally agree with Councillor Webb. I've actually attended one of these conferences in my career in local government, and they've been very, very informative, and it's an opportunity where industry leaders can mix and work with the industries, right across the industry, from whether they're individuals right through to major corporations, and the benefits that can come out of it. And I would encourage our staff, because it's locally, we haven't got the accommodation and the travel costs to actually attend it, because I do think that it is very, very beneficial, because it, as I said, I found it extremely informative, and I think we could get some out of it. And also, if the COVID crisis doesn't take over, it does provide that little bit of economic input to Tamworth. So I think it's $5,000 well spent. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Impey.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick comment. I think it's a fantastic opportunity for Tamworth to host this. COVID doesn't play a role, but I also think it's an opportunity for potentially some school students to go along and find out a bit more about that industry. The water industry is a very broad industry, and there would be some opportunities in our own backyard for students in schools. So I'd love to be able to see this conference marketed somehow within the schools, and so that schools are aware for that opportunity.
Thank you. Any final comments, councillors? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The motion is carried. Item 8.3. Move Councillor Wilson and Councillor Betts. Thank you. Councillor Wilson, do you wish to speak to your motion? Any councillors wish to speak against? Any councillors wish to make comment? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Those against? The motion is carried. And item 8.4. Move Councillor Betts and Councillor Impey. Thank you. Councillor Betts, do you wish to speak to your motion?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Any councillors wish to speak against? Any councillors wish to make comment? If not, I will put the motion. Those in favour? Those against? The motion is carried. Item 8.5. Move Councillor Betts and Councillor Webb. Thank you. Councillor Betts, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Yeah, just briefly, Mr. Mayor. It's one of these things that makes my blood boil that we've had to actually pay for this, because to me the water that's been extracted out of those wells basically is intrinsically linked to the river, and we've been in negotiations over the years. I can remember numerous occasions where we've been trying to negotiate with various authorities that those wells were just intrinsically linked to the water, and the fact that they didn't give any clear indication to stop or to actually keep going, and we're in a dire situation at that particular time, and I think it just makes, as I said, my blood boil, but I'll certainly support the motion. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any councillors wish to speak against? Any councillors wish to comment? Councillor Webb.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a few comments. One is that this is a bit of a mess, and it really is a problem because we haven't been given some clear guidance from bureaucrats at the state level. Now, councils are getting the blame around the community for taking water, taking more water than we should have, and so we're getting the blame for doing the wrong thing. The community out there don't actually understand that our water staff worked tirelessly for a month or so trying to get permission to continue to take water from those wells whilst the river was flowing, understanding that those wells are fed from the river that's flowing, not impacting on anybody in particular and not impacting on the river itself, to try and hold as much water as we could in Chaffey Dam for future use come spring and summer. Now, it's interesting that when we read the report, and Bruce, it's a very good report, I might say. It explains a lot of stuff if people take the time to read it. But it goes on to say that DPI water assessments have undertaken extensive modelling work. Now, I'm not a hydrologist, but I've been around for a while, and it's very easy to understand without having to use a computer to model this stuff, that if there's wells just close by a river and the river's flowing freely, that those wells on that alluvial plain will be recharged continually whilst the river's flowing. But they're basically trying to tell us that's not the case, and that we're impacting on the river flow and on the alluvium water. I mean, that's not the case. We know that's not the case. Common sense tells you that is not the case, but their computer modelling tells them that we're going to impact on the river flow and we're going to impact on the water levels in the alluvium. Mr Mayor, you've been around, you've been on the land. You know that if you've got a hole of water, whether it be a bore or a well, and you pump constantly from that bore or that well, and when you do stop pumping each day, if the levels don't recharge back to where they were initially, well then there is an impact on the water system. But you know, Mr Mayor, as I do, that if you're pumping from that well or you're pumping from that bore, and when you stop pumping each day, the recovery rate is quite good and it comes back to the standing water level that was there the day before, then there is probably little or no impact on the water table, or in this case, the river flowing past. So their modelling is, I think, is flawed, and it's just people sitting behind a desk using a computer and saying, well, this could happen or that could happen. But the other thing is that is most important. Here we are, we've got a Director of Water who is trying to provide a sustainable supply to our city, trying to leave water in Chaffey Dam for the spring and the summer that's coming before us, and thank God it's rained a little bit just recently, trying to do the best, trying to provide the best outcome for our community, and we get into trouble for it. We're getting into trouble for it from the bureaucrats, who in my mind, from the way they've described the impact on the water levels, don't actually know what they're talking about. Now, I know I could probably get into trouble for saying that because I'm not a hydrologist. I've got no engineering background in this area. But I do have a bit of common sense, and I have been around for a while, and I have got bores on my place, and I have had wells on my place, and I know how it works. And Bruce, I think you've done very well here, but I am ashamed to say that here we are having to purchase more water at cost to our community that we really shouldn't be having to buy. We shouldn't be having to spend this money. What's this water for? It's for critical human needs. We seem to be losing sight of that. But well done with the report, and I certainly support it.
Thank you. Any further comment, councillors? Councillor Otto?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think the principle that we probably did breach was that rule makers shouldn't be rule breakers, but we got into this awkward position because we over-extracted water for the use by the people of Tamworth, Katingal and Moonbi. And as Councillor Webb just said, critical human needs. It wasn't for a walnut farm somewhere away, it was for critical human needs. And on that basis, you sort of think this is so unfair in a country as big as Australia that we would have to do that and be in that invidious or awkward position because we're trying to provide water to our communities and save water elsewhere, which obviously, you know, at state level they weren't interested in saving. But just a few questions. Will buying this water or paying for more of this water, will that get us back in the good books with the government? And is there any update with NRA at all that could provide us any insight into what they plan to do?
Mr Mayor, I can't answer the first question. Council will have to make their own idea about that. In relation to NRA, no, there's no update. When I was interviewed, I asked them how long before we got any indication, and they said, oh, it won't take too long, and I said, is that 6 months? And they said, no, 2 to 4. So we're certainly not at 2 months from when I was interviewed. That was in late June, so I don't expect to hear for another few months.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Mr Mayor, just a comment. I think we all appreciate the Water New South Wales and DPI under pressure, and every decision they make, there's a counter decision. But surely if they factored in common sense, it would ease the pressure on the decisions. And our council was aiming, as has been said, to make a wise situation in a critical situation, a wise decision in a critical situation. But the thing is, we get no answer. We don't even get answers at times. We get no answers. So when one acts on common sense and using wise data, because there's no indication from relevant departments, how can one comply when what compliance means is not relayed to us? And I think that's been one of the problems all the way along. In the situation where we've had to act quite quickly, there's just no answer. How can you not answer in a critical situation? It defies logic, and it's inefficient, and at times it's quite dangerous.
Councillor Maxwell.
Yes, Mr Mayor, it's very sad that just in the comments about my fellow councillors, they talked about common sense. I think we all realise, and I was told by government officials, there's no such thing as common sense in law. Here we go. What an example. We try to save water and then you get belted over the knuckles for it. And I certainly think it's a great report, and in my mind, I'm sure we did the right thing, even if it's not common sense.
Thank you, councillors. If there's no further comments, I will close the debate and put the motion. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Motion is carried. Item 8.6. Councillor Rodder and Councillor Maxwell. Thank you. Discussion. Councillor Rodder, do you wish to speak?
Just one comment. There was clearly a error in the figure for Chaffey Dam, 15.5%, as the report was presented to us. But pleased to say that it's 19% at the moment, probably more than that now. But it's fantastic that our drought responses are being rewarded by the environment with some well-needed rain. But good report as usual, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Any councillors wish to speak against? Any wish to make comment? Councillor Wilson.
It's a great report. I'd just like to make a comment on the community engagement tool. It's really well placed to reach the whole community, and I think it's also ultimately educating our community for the future. So it's well placed to protect us as we sit under the shadow of climate change, really, because it's looking at every component right down to children and good habits to form. So it's a great tool, and it's been really well executed.
Thank you. Any other comments, Councillor Tickle?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Another thorough report from this department, and I agree with the Councillor Wilson. The education portal is a wonderful resource, not just for people, users of our web page, but for schools and their education programs. How easy is it when you're teaching to link into that site and use it to complement your lesson? And then, of course, the students can go home and hopefully show their family as well. The evaporative coolers, interesting how many breaches there have been, which I understand the breaches relate to mainly reported leaks, wasting water from them, and then the owners of that unit are advised that maintenance can perhaps fix the problem, and there's a rebate for doing that. But I think we should continue to educate the community on how much water the evaporative coolers do use, because most people are quite surprised. And last summer, with the drought in such dire straits as we were, the drought and our water, there was still people running those evaporative coolers. You can hear them all night long, and so I'm sure the community has been so responsible today. I'm sure if people actually understood how much water they use, they might just cut back a bit on it. There's no need to run them all night long. And definitely, if we keep stepping up our education as we have, more and more people, it's obvious by the rebates, servicing their coolers. They're only the ones that are seeking rebates. The use of tanks and the installation of tanks is ever increasing, and again, not only do we see that through the rebates, but many people are installing tanks and not asking for a rebate. So well done in all the education that we continue to do and the publicity around water.
Thank you. Any final comments, Councillor Betts?
Yeah, just very briefly. Mr Mayor, totally agree with the fellow councillors. It's a great report, great educational tool, and a marketing tool for our our community and the broader, well, not only our community, but the broader potential business community, people coming to Tamworth. We've gone through probably we have gone through the worst drought on record, and it's the people of the Tamworth region really need to be commended on getting us through to this stage. I think Councillor Otter said at the time of the report it was 15.5%, but at 3 o'clock this afternoon it was 19.48%, and I reckon it'll be just about over the 20% now. And what that is, that's probably close or around about 30% of the old capacity of the old dam. And that really message, I think, needs to get out there, because we have weathered this storm, the worst drought ever, and it should give businesses confidence that we have a very good water and drought management plan. So, yeah, commended to the report writers. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And councillors, I'll now put the motion. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Motion is carried. Item 8.7. Councillor Wilson and Councillor Betts, thank you. Councillor Wilson, do you wish to speak to your motion? Any councillors wish to speak against? Any councillors wish to make comment? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Motion is carried. Item 8.8. Councillor Webb.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to move a motion, but it's not the one printed. And the motion I'm going to move is that this matter be tabled and it be considered prior to the budget of 2021 in line with all of our other priorities, because I do believe that it, if I can get a second of that is, I do believe that this is a major expenditure, and it really should be considered. It really should be considered in.
What's the amendment, Councillor?
The amendment is that the matter be. I don't like to use the word deferred because that's not what I'm looking at. The matter be tabled and be presented again. Represented again with the 2021 budget estimates for consideration.
21, 22.
21, 22.
Yeah, I was going to say, you already adopted.
Yeah, sorry, 21, 22. Mr. Mayor, we've just considered our budget and just passed our budget for 2021, and this is a major expenditure, and I think the amount of money we're talking about here needs to be considered along with all of the other priorities that we consider at budget time. And had we been really considering this, we should have been considering with the last budget. I think when you look at the financials on this, they don't stack up to me. I can't see the savings. The money's either going to be borrowed or it's come out of the water fund in some way, shape or form. I don't really, the report that didn't fill me with any excitement, and I really think that this whole thing does need to be considered in its entirety with the council budget next year. I'm not comfortable with the recommendation as it's printed, and therefore I've moved the amendment. I've got a second.
Thank you. Councillors, could I just invite Mr. Logan to clarify the financial implications of the report, please? Just with regard to the cost, Councillor Webb, because and Mr. Logan might be able to explain at the back end of the report, the financial implications suggest that there is not a huge cost.
Mayor, I think so. In the financial implications of part of the report, I mean, I've listed the first one there. So over the life of 15 years, which is what we consider to be the life of the AMR devices, then if we continue to do what we presently do in terms of manually read the meters and replace them on a age basis, then and some other considerations, then that's $15.9 million it will cost council over those 15 years. If we retrofit the AMR devices, that is, we don't replace the existing meters all at once, and we retrofit AMR devices to existing meters, and we replace the meters in the future, then that price over 15 years is $18.5 million, and the third one there is replace the existing 20 and 25 mil meters now with new meters and with AMR devices built in, then the price $16.6 million. So in summary, my view, what I would say to the council is that that's approximately $700,000 more cost to council over 15 years, but obviously it's a matter for council as to whether they choose to proceed with this or not.
Thank you. So, councillors, do we have anyone to speak against the motion? Councillor Wilson?
Mr Mayor, we had a substantial workshop on this, and we went through all the alternatives and the comparisons and had a lot of discussion, a lot of questions, and we had industry people in the room to help us. And I'm confident that we need to do this. We're certainly not the first council to go down this path, but in our situation we need real-time metering. In the long run, it will not only save us money, but it will save water, and it'll give feedback back to business in terms of where there are obvious discrepancies on water use. It will become obvious. It'll help residents where they are using exorbitant water. It can be identified what time, and it can be tracked. It can help us identify misuse of water, because they'll be real-time readings. So in other words, when somebody uses an extraordinary amount of water between 2 and 4 a.m, then perhaps there's a reason they're not doing something quite legal. So it's one of those things that we have to bite the bullet and move ahead with. And I was confident from the workshop in the way it was presented and in the method we were presenting it, that now is a good time to do it. And I think now would be a good time for it to be accepted by the community, because water's topical. So I certainly would support the original motion.
So, any councillors wish to speak for Councillor Webb's motion? Do we have any councillors wish to make comment? The motion we have before us now is that this matter is carried over and presented again with the 21-22 budget, which would be, that work would be considered or started to be discussed by council in the first and second quarter of next year. So. Do we have any comments, councillors? Councillor Betts?
Yeah, look, I will, Mr Mayor, I second the motion because it's not eliminating the fact that we're going to look at putting automatic meters in, but just having the fact that we're heading now, we've got the dam as I said, 19.48% at 3 o'clock this afternoon, and it's on the way up, and we've got an El Nino pattern happening. I just think it is just common sense now, just to, because we're basically just deferring it, but it is something that we probably need to put it in line with our funding in the next budget. That's why I second it. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Tickle.
I'm not sure whether I'm sort of out of order here, but I'd like to speak against the amendment and for the original motion.
There is no amendment. This is the motion, so you're speaking against it.
Oh, I was speaking against that. We did have a substantial workshop on this. Whichever way we go, it's going to cost us money, whether we're replacing old units or installing an automated modern system to keep abreast with what's happening out there around us. And we can keep putting off and putting off and putting off. It's like any replacement programs. Eventually we'll have to do it. And like everything else, it will only increase in cost as we go along. So I definitely am against this. We've had a workshop on it. We gave staff direction to proceed, and I think that we need to stay with our original direction to staff and not only to staff but our expectations around the table at the time that we were moving into an automated system. So I would definitely speak against the amendment.
will do no.
Thank you. Any further discussion, councillors? Councillor Wilson?
Mr Mayor, can I have a foreshadowing motion?
Councillor Wilson, you just move an amendment. If you wish to move the original motion, you just move that as the amendment,
Can I
and then
move
that would be voted on.
Okay, so I'd like to move the original motion to become the amendment.
That's an amendment. Thank you. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Tempe, thank you. Councillor Wilson, do you wish to speak to your amendment?
Mr Mayor, I have spoken. It has to be done, and there's no point in delaying it. It'll only cost us more money because we'll be replacing meters have become obsolete. So we need to move on with it now.
Thank you. Any councillors wish to speak against the amendment? Councillor Webb?
Mr Mayor, we did have a number of workshops, and we asked for a report to come back with a bit more detailed financial analysis. And really, when you look through that, in my mind, and a couple of others that I've spoken to, it doesn't really paint the picture that I can support. And I think listening to the mover saying yes, we need to do it now. Well, we don't need to do it now. We're talking about spending a huge amount of money. This is a fairly big expenditure and should be considered at budget time. It doesn't pass the pub test, and I think that's very important for us as councillors to consider. If we do consider it at budget time, along with a lot of other items in priority, well then it certainly can be seen that this council is looking at all the major expenditures together, and they prioritise the ones that need to be considered and that need to be funded. We've just gone through the budget process, and here we are talking about spending this amount of money, massive amount of money. In my opinion, it shouldn't be happening. It should be happening in line with budget budget workshops into the future now. I think the amount of water it saves is a piddly amount of water. It's not really worth considering. It will work well into the future with other programs, but at the moment, I think we should just let it lay on the table and be considered at the next budget time.
Thank you. Councillor Webb.
Mr Mayor, I just want to make sure the council's got the right context around the financials based on what Mr Logan said, because I know the report says continue to manually read meters as per current practice. It's read and replace. Now, I'm sure everybody understands that we have to spend $15.9 million over 15 years if we just keep doing what we're doing at the moment. So we've still got to replace any meters that break, we've still got to replace our normal program and so on. So the decision you're making tonight is it worth spending $700,000 across 15 years to achieve all of the benefits that council, that's less than $50,000 a year for 15 years to achieve the automated reading of meters, the real-time data updates, the ability to identify leaks and so on. If that's worth less than $50,000 a year to you as councillors, then that's really what you're voting on. We have to spend $15.9 million no matter what. You're only spending $700,000 more over 15 years. In the context of some of the things you voted around water, education and initiatives and rebates and so on, less than $50,000 a year is not very much money.
Okay, do we have someone to speak for the motion? Councillor Eppie.
Yes. And just to make sure I'm speaking for the right motion, I'm speaking for the original. Yeah, for the new motion, which replaced the second motion. So, all right. Well, I've just been sitting back reflecting on things, and I think it's sound practice to replace the meter readers with AMRs, automated meter readers. If we waited a further 12 months, it may cost us another $500,000 more. And I think if you're talking about pub tests, for the sake of $700,000 over those 15 years, I think most people will be reasonably happy with that, if it means we have a more modern system in place. I guess my question is, does it seems to me that we would be bringing that normal $15.9 million expenditure forward and spending it in a shorter space of time rather than throughout the entire 15 years to put in automatic meter readers. Would that be right? Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, we're bringing forward $6.5 million.
Right.
And we're spending that in the first year.
Okay. So all, I think it was something like 22,000, 20 to 25 millimetre diameter meters would be replaced. Not all in that 6 years, or all of them in that 6 years?
Sorry, if the council elects to go ahead with AMRs, then all the 20 and 25 millimetres across the council area, so in all our centres, will be replaced. And then all of the larger diameter meters that aren't AMR compatible will be replaced. And then those larger diameter meters that aren't AMR compatible will be replaced as they get older.
Yep. Look, I think it passes pub tests. Yeah.
Thank you. Any councillors wish to speak against the amendment? Councillor Rodder.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm speaking against the original motion, which has obviously been replacing the...
We're dealing with the amendment now, which is not up on the screen. But
Yes, it is.
Oh yeah, beg your pardon. Yeah.
So I agree with Councillor Webb. I don't think I can't see that why we have to rush this, and I think his request is not unreasonable. To delay it for a year, given that and I say that I love technological advances and things like that, but councillors would also recall that in the workshop there was a little doubt over the quality of the software that would go with the new meters from Slovakia or where they're coming from, and on that basis, I cannot see why it wouldn't be prudent to wait a year. I mean, we can seek more, I guess, information about what proposed software package they propose and how that will interface with the meters and council systems. In relation to the matter about, that these new meters will tell people how much they're using, or will get those people that are using, excessive amount of water between 2 and 4 a.m. I mean, I don't think people really want. I think people would be annoyed if that was the reason that we were actually getting these meters, because they pay for the water anyway now. And if they use that water, if they use an excessive amount of water, or what we might consider an excessive amount of water between the hours of 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., I mean, what's it to us that they might be having a long shower at that time? They might have gone out and got a belly full of alcohol and they need a long shower, as plenty of people probably have done in their lifetime. But I think the reasons that Councillor Webb introduced the amendment, or the new motion, stand. I don't see there's a reason to speed this up, and we are, I understand the 15-year annualised cost here, but it is, in fact, initially we are spending more than $6 million in the first year to replace all those meters, and I think, while this technology progresses or gets better, I mean, we might, by delaying, we might find that there's a better alternative to the brand that we were looking at a few weeks ago.
Thank you. Any speakers for the motion now? Councillor Tickle.
I outlined my reasons earlier, and I still support proceeding. It's quite clear to me, and from the report and from the General Manager's comments, we're going to have to do this work anyway. We're going to be spending money. So whichever way we go, we're going to be spending money. It's just we're going to be spending it a little bit sooner. So it doesn't make sense to me to delay it, because later on we'll be spending more money because we've meanwhile updated old meters, and we'll decide to put in a new system, which is still going to cost that amount of money. So it makes absolute no sense to me, knowing that either way it's going to cost the same amount of money. So why wouldn't you update the system? It clearly in the report it does say where they have been used, not only the other council areas. It's a system that has proven itself, according to the research and the report before us, But the crux of all this is we're going to have to spend the money anyway, so why spend it on old infrastructure when you can have a new system? I don't get it. I mean, who does that at home? You keep patching things up and then next year put in a new system, so you've wasted your money you've spent this year? I don't get that at all. To me, that is perfectly clear in the report. We're going to be spending the money anyhow. So let's move on and just do it.
Thank you. Any final comments, councillors?
Mr. Mayor, just a question if I could.
Yeah, I'll take a question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just, so how many of the current meters, replacement meters would be in stock? You know, obviously we wouldn't have an excessive amount, but would there be a significant number of those meters that would replace any broken meters, and how many would that be?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I don't know how many meters we have in stock at any one particular time, but we don't replace, staff can only replace a limited number every week, so there's let's say for argument's sake 200 in stock, and they keep ordering them as they take them out of stock. I don't even know if we have 200 in stock.
Okay.
Move the motion report.
Thank you. And I agree. Councillors, I'll now put the motion, and we're all clear on what we're voting on.
We're voting on the amendment or the motion?
On the amendment, I'm sorry.
Now, hang on.
You're putting the amendment.
Putting the amendment as printed. All those in favour say aye. Aye. All those against? Aye. That's
4 each.
4 each. And as a casting vote, I will support the amendment. So now the amendment becomes a motion. Does anybody wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Wilson, do you wish to speak to the motion? Any councillors wish to speak against the motion? I'll put the motion. Oh, Councillor Rodder.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one point that I actually forgot to mention. You know, given our water woes, I just thought that $6.5 million would be far better spent on maybe investigating potable water reuse or recycling of those things, and that would be of greater benefit to the people of our local government area at the moment than replacing the water meters. So that's why I guess why I agree with Councillor Webb. Delaying it. I think there are better things to spend that sort of money on at the moment.
Thank you. Any final discussion, councillors? I'll now put the motion. Those in favour? Those against? That is a tied vote, and I will cast my vote with the motion. Thank you. That brings us to item 9.1. We have a mover for 9.1. Councillor Rodder, thank you, and seconded Councillor Tickle. Councillor Rodder, do you wish to speak to your motion?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any councillors wish to speak against? Any councillors wish to make comment? I will put the motion. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The motion is carried. Item 9.2. Move for Councillor Wilson and Councillor Betts. Thank you. Any discussion? Councillor Wilson. Any councillors wish to speak against? Any councillors wish to make comment? Not, I'll put the motion then. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The motion is carried. Brings us to item 9.3. Move Councillor Betts and Councillor Wilson, thank you. Councillor Betts, do you wish to speak to your motion?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Any councillors wish to speak against? Any councillors wish to make comment? Councillor Wilson?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, it'll be interesting to see whether this actually comes about because of our COVID situation, but nevertheless, I'd like to attend.
So, councillors, as part of item 2 on the recommendation, the recommendation suggests the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor and 2 councillors. So we have Councillor Wilson and Councillor Maxwell. We can have more than 2 councillors. Councillor Tickle, do you wish?
Or in attendance or a delegate, I don't mind.
Thank you. So councillors will need to just decide then. Are there any other councillors interested in going? We should have a support for councillor voting delegates. We have 3 councillors wishing to attend, so...
I'm happy to withdraw as a delegate.
And you'll be just an attendee?
Attendee.
Thank you. Okay, so we have the councillors Wilson and Maxwell as the voting delegates, along with the Mayor and Deputy Mayor. Any other discussion, councillors? Councillor Rodder?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just in relation to some possible motions, I was just thinking in relation to matters of importance to us would be, progressing water saving, water recycling opportunities that LG New South Wales could progress, as it's a critical issue for many of their member councils. They could progress discussions with state and Commonwealth level about environmental approvals and infrastructure and what those other tiers of government can do for local government. And the other one, which is probably going to be a little vexed, is maybe as revenues are reduced because of our current biological and economic calamities, maybe the LG New South Wales call on the Commonwealth Government to consider providing local government with a percentage of GST revenue.
That'll be a hoot.
Mr. Mayor, just on that one, Councillor Rodder, so the LG and SW conference normally just calls on state government. They make representations to ALGO, to make representations on behalf of, well, certainly to the federal government. So this being a state-based conference, you might be better placed to reword that to potentially take that to ALGO.
Yeah, right. Okay, I'll withdraw that.
So we'll, just seek support with regard to water recycling initiatives and funding. Okay, and councillors, I think if we can just forward any potential motions through to the General Manager over the next few weeks. Okay. Could we now put that motion? Those in favour? Those against? The motion is carried. That brings us to item 10.1. With Councillor Tickle and Councillor Wilson, thank you. Councillor Tickle, do you wish to speak to your motion?
No.
Any councillors wish to speak against? Any councillors wish to make comment? Councillor Wilson?
Mr. Mayor, increasingly our museums have come to be seen as something very substantial in our community and important. I think in prior days there was something that old fuddy-duddies like to put the bits and pieces together and that they found interesting and they represented the community. But our museums really help to ground a community and where they came from and displays of all kinds. There might be visual displays, there might be displays that you can actually pick up or participate in some way. What I really like about this policy, the way it's going, it's actually reflecting our history by including the City of the Light, the City of Light, Music City, Fossica's Way, and our national, internationally recognised now film and photography and sound archives. So it's really a critical document. We need to get it right. One of the hardest things with museums is to know what not to keep, and it causes quite a bit of dissension at times. However, it's an important document. This has been well formed, and I think it will serve our communities and the people in it very well. So I look forward to that becoming part of us.
Thank you. Any further comments, councillors? Councillor Maxwell.
Being one of those old fuddy-duddies that's involved in the museum, Mr. Mayor, I support this policy too.
Thank you. Councillor Betts.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Look, I totally support policy. I know it's just going out for public comment, but I would like a fair bit of marketing, our marketing team, to actually push this because it's so important. As Councillor Wilson said, it's not only just part of our history, it's a tourist attraction. And if we get it right and have it as a professional, managed museum collection right across our area, it goes right from Barrabah through right to Nundle, and there's just some brilliant collections of not only historical stuff, but modern equipment and processes, and I think it's just a synergy that will attract tourism, and I think it's just a wonderful thing to do.
Thank you. Any further comments, councillors? Wish to close the debate?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'd like to pay a credit to our director, Bridget Guthrie, and her team, because it's no mean feat doing all of this, and we're working, and this involves working with many volunteers and many people coming from different perspectives within a community, and it needs to be done tactfully and well and enthusiastically and professionally, and that's been achieved, and so I'd like to offer my congratulations to the staff and all involved.
Thank you. So, councillors, I'll now put the motion. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The motion is carried. Item 10.2, move Councillor Webb and seconded Councillor Impey. Thank you. Councillor Webb, do you wish to speak to your motion?
No, Mr Mayor, the minutes are a clear record.
Thank you. Councillor, any councillors wish to speak against? Any councillors wish to make comment? Not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The motion is carried. And councillors, before I call for a motion to go into closed council, I'd like to, I guess, acknowledge we have no members of the public in the chamber, so we're not able to ask if there's any members wish to have anything brought through to open council or not considered in closed council, but I would like to ask the General Manager if he's received any public submissions or representation. So, councillors, I'd now like to take that motion to move into closed council. Move Councillor Maxwell and Councillor Betts. Those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. And ask